I can confirm the meeting is now live, Leader.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to this executive meeting of the Thursday, the 7th of July. My name's Lynn Doherty and I'm the leader here at West Berkshire Council. This meeting is being held in the council chamber and over Zoom. Joining me in person are the members of the executive councillors Steve Arderwater, Dominic Bowick, Graham Bridgman, Ross McKinnon, Tom Marino, Richard Sumner, Joe Stewart and Howard Wollaston. Members of the shadow executive attending in person are councillors Jeff Brooks, Eric Pattenden and Tony Vickers. Other members of the council who are also in attendance are either in the virtual waiting room or attending remotely and can ask questions on any item included on the agenda. Members who are not on the executive are not able to vote on any of the agenda items. Please note, the voting to take place at this meeting will be done via a show of hands. The officers in attendance include the Chief Executive Nigel Lynn and Executive Directors Joseph Holmes and Andy Sharp. And Sue Halliwell has given her apologies, so John Winstanley is attending in her place. Shiraz Sheikh will be the legal advisor to the meeting, and I'm assisted by Sadie Owen, the clerk to the meeting, and Stephen Chard, who is acting as the Zoom host. Can we move forward to item 1 then, which is apologies? I understand we've had apologies from Councillor Lee Dillon. I'm not aware of any others. Sadie, any others come in?
Councillor Adrian absent, Alan Macro.
Thank you, Sadie. Can we move to item 2 then, which is the minutes from the previous meeting? Members, are you willing to accept the previous meetings as minutes as an accurate record of the meeting held on the 9th of June 2022? I see nobody having any issue with that. Therefore, can I find a seconder? In which case, can I please ask executive members to vote by using, not your microphone, sorry, by using your hand if you agree with the minutes to be signed as true and accurate.
Thank you, Leader. I can confirm that the minutes have been approved.
Thank you, Shiraz. Oh, apologies, I didn't see you there, Councillor Wollaston. Thank you. 1 abstention. Therefore, can we move to item 3, which is declarations of interest? Does anyone have any declarations of interest on this evening's agenda? No. In which case, let us move forward to item 4. Oh, sorry, Councillor Vickers. Apologies.
I have a point of order on relating to item 4. As this is a public meeting, it may be legal to have had no internet access, but I am aware of members of the public who weren't aware of items on the agenda, which they could have submitted urgent questions to had they been able to access the agenda. So would you agree with me and no less than the Chief Executive that while it may be legal, it's not acceptable for us to continue like this?
I'm going to go to my legal advisor, Shiraz Sheikh, on that, Councillor Vickers.
Thank you, Leader. The position has been made clear by the monitoring officer. We did issue the agenda on time, and the agenda was available at the council offices together with papers. Papers were circulated to members. We didn't receive any direct requests from members of public for electronic copy or paper copy, but paper copies, as with any of the meetings, public meetings, are available in the council offices. So I'm satisfied that the lawfulness of decision making is fine for this meeting, and I have no further concerns on that.
Thank you, Shiraz. And which case I'm happy to follow the legal guidance given to me this evening and proceed with this meeting. Can we therefore move to item 4, which is public questions? First of all, I would like to thank all the members of the public that have submitted questions for this evening's executive meeting, and welcome those of you able to be in attendance to hear the answers to your question and ask a supplementary question if you have one. For those public questioners unable to join this meeting, I can confirm that you will receive a written response to your question within 5 clear working days of the meeting. Your question will appear on screen and will be answered by the relevant portfolio holder. You will then be given the opportunity to ask a supplementary question, but please remember that this must be to clarify the response provided and not introduce any new business. In accordance with paragraph 5.12.9 of the Constitution, where questioners have more than one question, only their first question will be answered. If after all other first questions have been asked and answered and there is sufficient time, we will answer subsequent questions. Please note that the time limit for public questions is restricted to 30 minutes. And if your question has not been answered in that time, you will receive a written response within 5 clear working days of the meeting. The responses given either verbally at the meeting or in writing will be published on the Council's website. Mr. Graham Story has confirmed that he's unable to attend the meeting and therefore he will be receiving written responses to his question. Mr. John Goatley and Mr. Alan Pearce are in attendance in person to ask their questions. And I believe, and I just asked for confirmation from the clerk, that Ms. Paula Saunderson and Mr. Paul Morgan are attending remotely to ask their questions.
Yes, that's correct, Leader.
I've got a question mark over Mr. William Beard. Is he in attendance?
No, Mr. William Beard never returned the email, so he's not here.
So he will receive a written response to his questions. In which case, can I please invite Councillor Ross McKinnon to answer Mr. John Goatley's question A on the agenda?
Thank you, Leader. And good evening, Mr. Goatley. Nice to see you again. I saw in the paper today that you were agreeing with me, which was nice. Your numbers are a bit off, but you can't have everything. Now, look, I detect a little bit of sarcasm in your question, but I'm going to give you a completely straight answer. Let's see if you can do the same with your supplementary. Today is a day for new beginnings. Let's raise the discourse. Here we go. The Council's proposals for LRIE are set out in Executive Report EX 4219, which was approved at the last meeting of the Executive. Planning applications will be submitted and determined through the statutory planning process, and we expect to see a planning application for the depot site submitted within the next 12 months. Do you have a supplementary?
Well, yes, because my question, I did ask a similar question about 6 months ago when you said that there was no plan B, and then it suddenly appeared. But surely with economic drivers changing quickly, and events change, as today has shown in Parliament, you need more flexibility than just one plan. Would you agree?
Thank you very much for that question. The refreshed approach, in fact, is in direct response to the economic drivers behind the values of residential and commercial property changing. So I think our approach does demonstrate the flexibility that is required and that you request.
Thank you both. Can we therefore move on to question C, as Mr. William Beard's not here, question C on the agenda this evening, which is Paula Saunderson to Councillor Ross McKinnon. I take it you can hear us all right, Ms. Saunderson?
Yes, can you hear me?
Over to you, Councillor McKinnon.
Thanks, Leader. Good evening, Ms. Saunderson. Thanks for your question. The LRIE has been in existence for decades and is a designated protected area within the adopted local plan. During the course of the site's history, there have been numerous planning applications leading to development on the site. Now, appropriate assessment of flood risk, which does include sequential and exception tests where necessary, must be carried out as part of the statutory planning process. As the freehold owner of the estate, the Council commissioned an environmental appraisal report in 2021, which concluded that there were no in-principle issues to prevent development on the estate and that flood risk and drainage could be satisfactorily addressed at detailed design stage during the planning process. Do you have a supplementary?
So does that mean that they have been conducted?
Which ones in particular, Ms. Saunderson?
The sequential and exception tests for the whole site or for individual plots?
All I can really say is that the environmental appraisal report, which was conducted last year, concluded there was no in-principle issues. Sequential and exception testing will be part of planning applications as they arise and will be carried out at the appropriate time.
Thank you both. Can we therefore move to item D on this evening's agenda, which is Mr. Alan Pearce to Councillor Richard Sumner?
I think it's to me again, Leader. I'll take this one. Good evening.
Apologies.
That's fine. Good evening, Mr. Pearce. Hi there. The original commissioning of the SPD for the estate was put back in order to allow an environmental appraisal report to be carried out during 2021. Do you have a supplementary?
Yes, I do. Thank you. I'm just trying to get a bit more understanding of the time frame here. The refresh report said that it would be adopted, the supplementary plan document 2024. That's 4 years after you commissioned the SPD. So is it the officers not delivering your aspirations, or are your aspirations what officers can't deliver? Because the time frame seems to be too long.
What was the question in there, Mr. Pearce?
The question was, it's taking 4 years. That's at the very best, that from when the SPD was commissioned to when it's actually going to be adopted. Why is it taking so long? What's going wrong?
It's not necessarily things going wrong. The timetable of the SPD is now linked into the timetable of the emerging local plan, and following the refresh, as you correctly say, is expected to be done by the end of 2024.
Thank you.
Thank you both. Can we move therefore to question E, which is Mr. Paul Morgan, to Councillor Howard Wollaston.
Thank you for your question, Mr. Morgan. If the council decides to proceed with Manor Park and planning consent is achieved, the pitch will be used for football and will be marked out for that use. Do you have a supplementary?
Is Mr. Morgan with us?
I'm here. Can you hear me? Okay, that's good. Good, very good. Yeah, I'll have a problem with the camera, so you've got the benefit of my picture, not me in real person today. So, yeah, I do have a supplementary question, Councillor Wollaston. It's curious, isn't it? Because so you're replacing a rugby pitch, and you're saying it's a football pitch you're replacing it with. Now, I would, Councillor McKinnon said it's time for new beginnings here. Please, will you be honest with everybody, including your fellow councillors, that the intention of Manor Park or its equivalent is part of the playing pitch strategy, which is to provide an additional pitch for the replacement of Friday Road? Why are you not being honest about that?
I don't think we've been dishonest. That is the case.
Oh, it is a replacement for Friday Road. Yeah, okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
Can we move to question G on the agenda then, which is Mr. John Goatley to Councillor Howard Wollaston.
Thank you, Mr. Goatley. The provision of the artificial 3G pitch will result in the loss of a grass pitch at Newbury Rugby Club. Although the new 3G pitch significantly increases the capacity for teams to play football and rugby, it is a requirement of Sport England, who perform the role of statutory consultees in relation to any planning application that impacts on playing fields, that a lost grass pitch is replaced. Even the new 3G pitch at Newbury Rugby Club, there remains a shortage in supply of sports pitches to meet demand, particularly for playing matches. So further pitches are required in the Newbury and Thatcham area. The main reason, however, is that there is no suitable council land near the sports hub. Do you have a supplementary?
Yes. Just taking that lot in. This pitch is not making extra pitches, it's just replacing pitches. So you're spending a minor fortune ending up with exactly the same number of pitches as you started with, except that you've now got some in a hub and then one the other side of town. So what you've effectively got is a bicycle wheel with one spoke. It's not going to work, is it?
The difference is that we will have a 3G pitch, which is capable of 80 hours of play compared to 6 for a grass pitch. So we've significantly improved the ability for teams to play football within the Newbury area.
Thank you both. Can we move then to item I on our agenda, which is Mr. Saunderson to Councillor Ross McKinnon.
Thanks, Leader. Hello again, Ms. Saunderson. I referred to my earlier response to question C, in which I explained that appropriate assessment of flood risk is carried out as part of the statutory planning process. Such assessments must be submitted by the applicant as part of the planning application, so it would be for any developer to commission them. The council has no plans to submit an outline planning application for the entire site. Do you have a supplementary?
No, thank you.
Thank you both. Can we move on then to question J, which is Mr. Alan Pearce to Councillor McKinnon.
Okay, hello again, Mr. Pearce. The council is not planning to submit a large planning application for the entire site. Executive Report 4219 make it clear that the option to submit an outline planning application for the site is not being pursued. Instead, the council expects a planning application for parts or the whole of the depot site to be submitted by a potential new occupier by mid-2023. The timescale for adopting an SPD, though, as I said earlier, is linked to the local plan review, which has not yet been submitted for examination. In the interim, the council will work up a placemaking strategy to inform negotiations with existing and potential new leaseholders until such time as it can be adopted as an SPD, but that is subject to the statutory planning framework. Do you have a supplementary?
Yes, thank you for your answer. I still can't understand why you're developing one site there. It's known that there's problems on the LRE for infrastructure, blue infrastructure, green infrastructure, placemaking. Why are you going ahead with a development that will fix you on certain aspects of London Road until you've got your SPD in place? Surely that should come first before you submit any large plan applications.
All I can do is repeat my answer that the timescale for adopting an SPD is linked to the local plan review. I've got nothing further to add.
Thank you.
Thank you both. Can we move therefore to item L on our agenda this evening, which is Ms Paula Saunderson to Councillor Ross McKinnon.
Thank you, Leader. And hello again, Ms Saunderson. The Gateway Plaza development was not mentioned in the executive report because the report was focused on the council's strategic objectives and our delivery strategy for the site as a landowner. Details of developments proposed by third parties on this site are publicly available through the planning portal. Do you have a supplementary?
Well, there were other things mentioned in the report that are not directly owned by West Berkshire Council. So I just wondered why, was there a specific reason why this, is there a problem with it? Is it going ahead? Because it's quite a chunk of the corner. At the moment, it's like having a jigsaw box with no lid and corner and side pieces missing if you're a resident.
Thank you for that, Ms Saunderson. I'm afraid it's not appropriate for me to comment on sites which are owned by third parties and any applications that they may be bringing forward.
But they are in the red line. Thank you.
Thank you both. Can we move to item M then on this evening's agenda, which is Mr Alan Pearce to Councillor Ross McKinnon.
Thank you. Hello again, Mr Pearce. Work has not yet begun on developing the SPD, so it's not possible to give the exact area that it will cover at this time. Do you have a supplementary?
Yes, I do, really. I'm struggling to understand what's going on London Road Industrial Estate. Surely after 2 years, you would have had the outline of your SPD in your sites, surely. Is that not right?
I have nothing further to add to my previous answer.
Thank you both. Can we move then to item N on this evening's agenda, which is Ms Paula Saunderson to Councillor Ross McKinnon.
Thank you very much. I refer you again to my earlier response to question C and question I, in which I explained that appropriate assessment of flood risk is carried out as part of the statutory planning process, and the council has no plans to submit an outline planning application for the LRIE site. Do you have a supplementary?
That's not the right answer to this question, but I've actually been in discussion with place executives this week, and they are going to look at having a methodology for conducting cumulative impact of development on flood risk in a catchment area, which means more than one plot. So that's good news. Thank you very much.
Thank you both. Can we move them forward? I think actually, Ms Saunderson, the rest are all from you. So O on this evening's agenda, which is Ms Saunderson to Councillor Tom Marino.
Good evening, Ms Saunderson. Thank you for your question. Clay Hill Ward currently has 2 elected representatives who are fully committed to the ward and to their duties as councillors. Do you have a supplementary?
Well, until this week, the telephone number of one of them was not operative, and it hasn't been for about a year. And one of them doesn't answer emails. I've had emails returned unread. So Councillor Beck is effectively trying to cover 6,000 residents. So that I always involve him in what I'm doing as a flood warden. He's fully up to speed. but I do worry about the ability to pick up cases of individual residents with only one fully active member. Member. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that. As I'm sure you'll appreciate, I can't speak on behalf of other members, those who aren't present at this meeting. However, I've noted your concerns and I'll discuss them with the Conservative Group Leader.
Thank you very much, Tom.
Thank you. And finally, item P, question P, sorry, on the agenda this evening.
Thanks, Leader, and thanks, Ms Saunderson, again for this question. The executive report made it clear that the proposal is for a competition amongst local schools to find a new name for the estate, which reflects the district's carbon neutrality ambitions. Suggestions will be shortlisted by a panel, including members, business representatives and commercial property agents. The Executive Director Place, in consultation with the portfolio holder for economic development, that's me, has been given delegated authority to make the final decision on that new name. Do you have a supplementary?
Yes, please. Can you not include, can you still hear me? Yeah.
Yes,
can you not include Riverside or River Walk, because we've got lots of rivers, and Post and Parcels. We've got 2 Riverside industrial estates, business parks, Riverside lanes, and things go missing. And I'm on River Walk, so no rivers, please.
Thanks, Ms Saunderson, for that. We'll see what the kids come up with, but
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody, and thank you for those questions. We can now move to item 5, which is petitions. I'm not aware that any petitions have been handed in unless...
No petitions.
Okay, thank you. Members, before we move to the substantive items on this evening's agenda, I've been asked by Councillor Stewart if she would be able to make a statement, which I, as chairman, have granted Councillor Stewart the ability to do so. So I'm going to hand over to you, Councillor Stewart.
Oh, you wish. Thank you, Leader, for granting me this opportunity to share the latest position with the consultation on the future of No Trees Care Home, which I think is really important that we do at this point. As a reminder for everyone, the recommendation which was put out to consultation was that No Trees Care Home be closed, as the building requires significant investment and it provides residential care for those with relatively low needs, and which is a declining part of the market. The consultation has now closed and all responses have been reviewed by council officers. I want to say a big thank you to everyone who took the time to provide their thoughts, and that includes the ward members, parish councils, family members, and very importantly, the staff and residents of No Trees. A well thought through proposal from the registered manager and her team was particularly interesting. The feedback was clear that the service is very valued by the residents, their families, and the local community, and that its closure would have a significant detrimental impact. Responses demonstrated that the local community sees No Trees as playing an important role in the life of their community. Consequently, I'm pleased to be able to announce tonight that officers in adult social care will update their recommendation and propose that we do not proceed with the closure, but instead undertake further work to explore ways to make the service viable in the longer term. Paul Coe, the Adult Social Care Service Director, and I have this afternoon visited the staff and residents of No Trees to inform them of this change in our approach. A letter will follow to the families of residents, and they will all have the opportunity to ask further questions. An updated report showing revised options and recommendations will be considered by elected members at the Executive Board, currently scheduled for September. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Stewart. That was very useful. Can we therefore move on to item 6 on our agenda this evening, which is adult social care strategy. Councillor Stewart, I believe this is your item.
That's correct.
Does this report find a seconder?
Does indeed, Leader.
Okay, over to you, Councillor Stewart, to introduce the report.
Thank you, Leader. I am today proposing the adoption and publication of the Adult Social Care Strategy, which has been through consultation, including staff, stakeholders, and the wider public. Some changes have been made following the feedback received, and you can see an overview of those changes in 5.6 of the paper. As with any strategy, a critical part is the delivery plan, and that's what our adult social care teams are working on at the moment. Bearing in mind social care reforms ahead, as well as data coming in from the Census 2021 results, which are now being published. This will help to shape our plan and ensure we're continuing to lead our adult social care services to meet our statutory duties, but also adapt to the changing world of care needs around us. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bridgman, do you wish to add to that?
Reserve my right.
Okay, members of the executive, do you have any questions with regards to this report? No, members of the shadow executive. Councillor Vickers.
Thank you, Leader. First of all, I'm very pleased to hear Councillor Stewart's statement. I have a number of people that I know as being a former member for Kintbury many years ago. I made a number of friends there, and they've been greatly concerned about the proposal to close. And I've seen the alternative proposal from Zoe, the manager, and it seemed to stack up to me and to Councillor McCrow, who can't be here. But as you see, he had 2 questions down on the agenda, so we were expressing our concerns. My question, though, is about para 7.2 in the summary report, where you said it's not subject to call-in, this strategy, and delays in implementation could compromise the council's position. So can we please have some, expansion on what is being compromised if we can't call this strategy in for a bit of discussion at SMC? Because it doesn't appear from reading the report as though there's anything in there that would matter if it was delayed a bit.
I'm going to actually go to my legal officer, and unless my executive director would like to take that.
Shiraz might want to add to this, but in terms of the purpose of the strategy, it's to build us forward into a delivery plan. So if we delay taking strategy forward, the delivery plan is delayed when it follows. There is a series of changes to legislation for adult social care that are taking place at the moment. So the strategy sets us in play for that change in legislation. So there are actions that form part of the strategy that will also respond to that legislative change, which is why we've taken the decision to include that statement within the report. Obviously, the delivery plan follows the strategy, and members will have sight of that in the forthcoming period.
May I sort of come back just to pursue that a little bit, Leader? So are you saying, Mr. Sharp, that without a strategy to be able to refer to that has been adopted in discussions with central government, you're not in a strong position to put the council's case? Is that sort of in summary?
In summary, it weakens the position. It's not impossible. But obviously, having a strategy that we have in place that responds to that legislation allows us to take forward the response in a way that is consistent with what we're trying to do operationally.
Thank you both. Councillor Brooks.
Thank you. And may I say also, because you allowed Councillor Stewart to make an announcement, it's pleasing to hear that no trees will stay open, but I do lament the fact that people will have been very, very anxious by your initial plans to close it. And I do wish you had actually been more thorough and found ways of keeping it open without having to go through the consultation process, engaging with the staff, and coming to the conclusion you have tonight or today or whenever you come to it and announced it, without having to set that hair running and worried a lot of people as a result of it. Coming to this adult social care strategy, which again, these strategies always, I find them very thin, and I'll tell you why in a moment. But I've got a specific one on 3.11. Adult social care should support people to access the digital offer and also ensure that non-digital alternatives continue to be made available where needed. I'm grateful for that, and I wonder if that will be something that might lead the answer to my question later in the meeting, Leader. On page 46, number 7, modernising adult social care, very, very thin. Build back better. This will need to adapt to new rules. It's a paragraph. Build back better in this strategy is 2 sentences. Really, this doesn't cut it. This just doesn't cut it. We're developing a statement 9.3 on our provision of care homes. The statement's already been issued. You're still developing the statement. It's already been issued. These strategies to me really don't mean anything. I like the font and I like the colour, but frankly, it's the delivery plan where the work is set out, and the strategy, frankly, is a tick box exercise.
Councillor Stewart, would you like to come back on that?
Thank you, Councillor Brooks. If we start with the no trees piece, it's very easy to say, let's assume and make decisions without consulting. And we now have a strategy in place where we make sure that we consult our residents, our stakeholders, and anybody involved in a particular piece of work that we're looking into. Having said that, I do agree that it is not a nice position for people to be in. And that was why I was insistent that we go to visit No Trees today to put those people's, both staff and residents and their families, put their minds at rest. And that was also the reason for me asking the leader to be able to make that statement tonight, so that we actually, set the scene now so that people can have their concerns alleviated. In terms of the strategy, it's a shame that all of our strategies seem to get this type of criticism. And actually what we're trying to do is we're trying to put in place better services for our residents. And the delivery plan absolutely is, I agree with you there, is the piece that gives us the power to make those changes. So I will be encouraging, working with, continuing to talk to the adult social care teams to make sure that we get a strong delivery plan in place. The digital piece, I'm very, very keen on making sure that we have all types of mechanisms to be able to consult with people, but also for our residents to be able to contact us as well. I often talk about a neighbour of mine who's not in my ward, but a neighbour who is unable to access digital means. And I always use her as the example. Well, how would this individual get this information? And I use that in all of my conversations with the adult social care teams as well. They're probably bored of it by now, I would think. So you absolutely have my assurance that piece is something that I'm very keen on. And in terms of the shall we say, the bigger pieces of work, so Build Back Better, you mentioned in particular, it's very difficult to put something into a strategy about Build Back Better when actually it is still being developed. So we actually are working with central government to try and shape that, but it is not all still, fully fleshed out, shall we say. So we have to reference it, of course, within the strategy, that it would be wrong to not include it. But again, the delivery plan will be the vehicle that helps us to deliver what we need to do as part of Build Back Better.
Thank you, Councillor Stewart. Councillor Culver.
Can you hear me okay? Yeah, thank you. I had problems with the sound earlier. Thank you, Leader, and thank you, Councillor Stewart. I was going to ask about the Build Back Better as well, and not just to criticise, but actually to ask whether you've got any indication yet from central government about the kind of problems that this might cause for the council in terms of cost, having to provide services to more people, different kinds of people, and so on. I was also wondering who exactly is on the Carers Strategy Board. It would be interesting to know if we've got all of the right kinds of people on that strategy board that can inform our work. Particularly, I know a lot of unpaid carers are very concerned about the lack of support that they have. And I think the number of unpaid carers is probably going to grow in the future, and it's going to be a particular challenge for us, particularly when it comes to things like respite care, which they so desperately need. And also, we often talk about joined up thinking. I'm wondering, is there more that we can do with our planning colleagues to ensure that when new developments come forward, some of the units are already adapted for use by people with physical disabilities and the elderly and so on? Thank you.
I may have to look to my right, and you knew that was coming, didn't you? I will say, in particular, if I take your last point first, Councillor Culver, I think that's a really interesting point, and I will explore that further. I think you're absolutely right. Joined up thinking is something that I'm very keen on, and I don't know that we always get it right. I think we intend to, but we don't always quite get that right. So I've taken a note of that. In terms of the Carer Strategy Board and the other point, are you able to take that, Andy? Thank you.
That's fine. So in terms of the Carer Strategy Board, I can't give you the exact details of who's on that board, but in principle, it's carers organisations and carers themselves. And we can provide you with a written answer as to who actually attends the Strategy Board after the meeting. But in terms of the engagement around Build Back Better, we have had some of the guidance around how that's going to operate around the new legislation, and we started to work through the costs associated with that and the delivery models, which you'll see reflected in some of the elements of the strategy. But as Councillor Stewart alluded to earlier, it is still evolving. We are part of the programme of work with central government around helping to develop the ICT infrastructure that will underpin some of the new arrangements. So we're quite well cued in to the way things are evolving, but we haven't got all the final guidance, and some of the guidance actually came out today. We're in the process of reviewing that guidance at the moment.
Thank you both. Councillor Vickers, I see your hand's gone up again. I don't normally come around for a second sweep.
Well, my first question was really about the overarching issue of the call-in. I did have this one point I would like to question Councillor Stewart on about what's in the strategy, if I may.
Okay.
Thank you. I totally agree with what you've just said about the digital divide and about having somebody you know in mind. But my question is relating to 3.10 on the strategy, page 7 of the actual strategy itself and page 41 of our papers. And it's followed by a graph on the following page. It's quite exciting what can be done now in technology to enable people to live in their own home. And I see sort of vaguely that's recognised, but I can remember, and perhaps members opposite don't remember, but we used to have a team that went out to visit older people in their homes and showed them hands-on, sitting beside them, how to use the technology. And I wondered if that was part of our strategy going forward. Because enormous cost savings are, I'm sure everyone realizes, if people can help themselves while staying in their own home, and often that stops them having to go to more expensive care, outside of their home. So I'd like to ask, because I couldn't see in the structure of the teams below, I couldn't see clearly whereabouts such people would fit, or indeed if there are such people in the team.
Indeed, there are such people in the teams, but they're embedded in the team. So the way that it operates is that if a worker is out meeting with a resident about their care needs, they will be able to talk to them about the technology that's available and the offer that's there for technology support. And there are people that can go out and demonstrate that equipment as well if that's required. So it is part of the model of care and support that we provide within the service.
Thank you both. One of Councillor Culver's questions wasn't answered. Do you want to say which bit we haven't come back on, Councillor Culver?
Yes, thank you, Leader. It was about improvements in help for unpaid carers and respite care. If you could give me a bit more detail about what you think we can do to improve that in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Caroline. As you can tell, we're having a bit of a debate here about who answers it. I think respite care actually is one of those topics of conversation that has been very prevalent in the conversations about no trees, and also I've had many a conversation via email. I think it's probably fair to say with some of our residents who are also concerned about the availability of respite care. I think it is something that is very near the top of our agenda and always in the forefront of our minds about what we can do to improve that situation. So I can definitely say, as part of the No Trees proposals, that is something that we're looking at in particular. Does that answer your full question, Councillor Culver?
Yes, I'm sure this is something we can discuss more in the future as well. Yeah, thank you for that.
Thank you both. I can see no more hands, so I'm going to go over to you, Councillor Bridgman. Is there anything you want to add?
Leader, I just want to reflect on a couple of things. I mean, firstly, I hear what Councillor Brooks says about strategy and delivery, and clearly the delivery plan will be a very important document and setting out exactly all those pieces that we need to work through. And also just reflecting on the digital inclusion piece. Certainly, I think we're all aware that the large number of I hesitate to use the word elderly population are becoming digitally included. So the numbers of people who aren't digitally capable is reducing, I think. And indeed, I certainly, and I'm sure all of us, sometimes prefer to enact something digitally because it's quicker and you are master of the process. And certainly I think that some of the modernising adult social care piece will come through with some improvements in service because people will be doing stuff for themselves that they were previously relying on officers to do for them. So I'm keen on all of that. I think the other thing I just reflect on is these things are ever changing. If we look at the numbers for the adult population in West Berkshire set out on page 6 of the strategy and page 40 of the pack, these are numbers that were estimated in 2019, estimated for the mid-2019, based on the 2011 census. Now, of course, we've had the 2021 census figures out since then, and I simply reflect that the over 65 population in the table is shown as an estimate mid-2019 at 13,500. And the numbers we've now seen show a population of 31,600. So in looking at, here over the 8 years between 11 and 19, it was showing a 29% estimate increase. In fact, between 11 and 21, we have a 33.8 actual percentage increase. So I think we have to reflect that we are an area which has an increasingly elder population above the age of 65. I don't want to use the term elderly because I'm in there. Aging, yes, I take that. And indeed, if you look at the tables, not that they affect necessarily the ASC strategy, but if we look at the census figures, we've got a 1.4% decrease in those under 15 and stable numbers 15 to 64. So that just shows you where our numbers are increasing and the pressures that will come onto adult social care as time goes on. Something that does need to be sorted out by the government. I've said it before, I'll say it again. And we need to put our statement into the government about where we are and what we expect from them. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you all. So we have a report before us, we have a proposer, we have a seconder. Can I ask executive members to vote by a show of hands if they're in favour of the proposals to approve the recommendations?
Thank you, Leader. I can confirm that the recommendation has been carried.
Thank you, Shiraz. Can we move therefore to item 7, which is the contract award for Downland Sports Centre expansion project? Councillor McKinnon, I believe this is you.
Yes, please, Leader. I'd like to propose the recommendations in the report.
And does this find a seconder?
It does, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Wollaston. Over to you, Councillor McKinnon.
Thank you very much, Leader. So this report seeks approval from the Executive to delegate authority to award the contract for the works to complete the Downland Sports Centre expansion project once that tender process has been completed and the outcome is known. So the Down School is located in the north of West Berks in Compton, and the sports hall facility, which is currently extant, was built in the 1980s. It's utilised during the school day by the school and by the community in evenings and weekends by various groups, including a badminton club, scouts and archery competitions. There is also a small gym on site. This procurement is going to substantially improve the offering. It will provide a suitably sized sports hall to help the school improve its delivery of the PE curriculum and increase the variety of sports available to all pupils, which is clearly a desirable outcome. and that'll improve the potential of current and future pupils of the school. The gym on site at the moment is very small and really has limits on its uses and limiting the income therefore. This is a high priority for the Education Service, and to make sure that it proceeds as per the current capital programme, we're asking for delegated authority to be given tonight so that the contract can be awarded immediately once the outcome of the tender process is known. Thanks, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor McKinnon. Councillor Wollaston, do you want to come in now?
I reserve my rights, please, Leader.
Thank you. Members of the Executive, any questions for Councillor McKinnon? Members of the Opposition, Councillor Culver.
Thank you, Leader, and thank you, Councillor McKinnon. The schools in my ward, I called in the planning application for it on the 31st of January and it hasn't come to committee yet. Could you clarify for me what the timetable is going to be vis-a-vis the tendering process and the planning application coming to committee? Are you going to wait until you know whether you've got planning permission before you do the tender exercise, or are you going to be running them in parallel in the hope that it does get permission? A bit of clarity about the timetable would be welcome. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Culver. I can't give you that detail offhand. I'm sort of looking to my left to see if Mr. Holmes has any idea about that. We'll come back to you on that, Councillor Culver, if that's okay.
Thank you.
Okay, I see no other hands, so I'm going to go to Councillor Wollaston.
Nothing further to add, Leader.
Thank you all. Members of the Executive, we have a proposal in front of us and we have a seconded by Councillor Wollaston. Can I see if the recommendations as set out on the paper, I'm not going to read them out, meet with the approval by raising your real hand to show if you're happy with the proposals.
Thank you very much, Leader. I can confirm that the recommendation has been carried.
Thank you, Shiraz. Item 8 is another contract award, but this time for the Castle Field Secondary provision. Councillor Bowick, I believe this is your report.
Yes, I'm proposing acceptance of this report.
Okay, and does that find a seconder?
Seconded, Leader.
Okay, in which case back to you, Councillor Bowick.
Thank you, Leader. The paper before us this evening it relates to the last phase of a £4.5 million project to provide secondary education for children and young people with SEMH ASD needs. We're doing this by refurbishing the old buildings at the old Thiel Primary School and constructing further buildings. So it's great use of a facility that would otherwise go to less community-minded uses. When complete, the new school will accommodate up to 42 pupils up to the 6th form, and it will allow the teaching of West Berkshire children with these needs closer to home, which will be much more satisfactory than the present arrangements, which involve children travelling considerable distances with extra costs to the council for private or out-of-area provision. The paper before us this evening seeks approval to award the contract for the construction phase of the project, which is a value of £3,324,000. This project has been delayed by the impact of COVID. And if the executive accept the recommendations here, authority will be granted to the head of education to award the contract rather than wait for the next executive meeting after the conclusion of the tender process in August. This will move things along and avoid any further delay and increasing costs, and more importantly, provision will be assured for young people in September.
Thank you, Councillor Bowick. Members of the Executive, do you have any questions for Councillor Bowick? Councillor McKinnon, do you want to speak just now, or?
I'll wait until the end. Thanks, Leader.
Any questions from members of the opposition? No, I see no hands, in which case back to you, Councillor McKinnon.
Thanks very much, Leader. Yeah, as Councillor Bowick says, this is an essential provision which is going to provide a real enhancement to the service to our children. Very, very delighted to second.
Thank you both. Members of the Executive, you can see before you the recommendation to resolve to delegate authority. Can I see a show of hands if you are in favour of the recommendations before you in this report?
Thank you very much, Leader. I can confirm the recommendation has been carried.
Thank you, Shiraz. Therefore, we can move to item 9 on the agenda this evening, which is the Recovery Strategy Closure Report. This report is being proposed by myself. Does that find a seconder?
Does indeed, and I reserve my right, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Bridgman. The report before you this evening is to really summarise the actions that have occurred as part of the COVID recovery strategy, and to close down that particular piece of work and move it across into business as usual. Actually, when I read through this report, I've been reflecting back to March 2020, and I suppose our optimism in June 2020, when we were already looking at what recovery would look like, and I would actually say that was quite a bit of forethinking on our behalf. It may have seemed premature at the time, but we were recognising very quickly that the impact that COVID was having on our district, and there is no way we can lighten that district. That impact, you can see in the report itself that we've had 332 deaths in the district, and therefore there will always be a lasting impact from COVID here in West Berkshire. And I don't think some of the full impact has been realised, and I will think we will be seeing that for many, many years to come. However, I do think that there are the opportunity now to actually move this into our business as usual, because I think all areas of the council will continue to respond. I just wanted to reflect on the work that's been done, and I wanted to do that because so many people have pulled together to make that happen. It's been a real partnership piece of work. We recognised very quickly there were three key areas that we wanted to work with: health, education and our local economy, and actually that received cross-party support. We all agreed they would be the primary aims here in West Berkshire as we look towards recovery. With regards to health, we have to look at the success of the vaccine rollout here. West Berkshire is in the top 10% of local authorities with the highest vaccination rate. We know West Berkshire Council cannot take credit for that alone, and we've worked in partnership with the NHS for the rollout of the vaccine, and so many fantastic volunteers across the district made that happen. And I think that was one of the sort of key areas that I felt it was important to highlight to you all this evening. We also know that 450 West Berkshire businesses have benefited from a total of 6.42 million of ARG funding. I know the lengths that the teams sat behind that went to over the period, and I can remember very early days having lots of conversations with our executive director for resource around, we need to get this money out and we need to get this money out fast, but doing so in an appropriate way that made sure the district wasn't open to fraud, and we could actually verify that. And actually the way that the district has bounced back in terms of the local economy really, I think, starts to show some of the strengths of that grant funding and what it was used for. An area, I think, as well within that is employment. And I think what we've seen is the Kickstart programme is immensely successful here in West Berkshire. We are, as a council, recruited 16 young people to work directly with us and a further 13 into businesses across the patch. So I think in terms of business, and we're certainly seeing from a local economy bounce back perspective that some of that work's been really successful. I appreciate the current financial situation is putting an additional impact on everybody, and very much part and parcel of coming out of COVID. The other areas I just wanted to highlight were obviously with regards to health, and I think we'll see for a very long time yet the impact on people's health, both physical and mentally. I think the Surviving to Thriving Fund was really innovative. We've done 2 funds in conjunction with our partner Greenham Trust, and I thank Greenham Trust for the support in that. It's made it really a simple way of operating, and we saw that come through the hub projects really. But the Surviving to Thriving gave out 200,000 for mental health projects. We funded 30 projects here in West Berkshire, and I know a lot of people have benefited from that. It's not over, there's lots more work to do, but I think that's really given us a good push in the right direction. And then physical activity, we had the Get Active funding, again in partnership with Greenham Trust. So I think there's some really important pieces of work around our health, which are ongoing. And then finally, with regards to our children, I think our children are probably the most adversely impacted of all ages. We're now starting to see that. Our schools are now starting to see that as children born during the pandemic are starting to come forward to preschools and nurseries, and we're starting to understand the impact of social isolation and being actually staying at home has had on them. And I think there's a huge amount of work still to be done, but what we've done, I think, has been very successful. And I think particularly around our increased support around SEND, and we recognise that was a real pressure point. So I'm really pleased to bring forward this report. I'd like to thank everybody. And when I say everybody, I don't say that glibly, because so many people have been involved in delivering this, not just West Berkshire Council, but volunteers across the district, our partnerships across the district. We know we're not through yet. We know there's still more work to be done, but this feels like the appropriate junction to move this into our business as usual. So all of the work that's currently going on, the streams, will move into the associate directorates within the local authority. So I'm really pleased to put this report before you this evening, and I hope that the recommendation to disband the COVID-19 recovery work will be accepted by you all tonight. More than happy to take any questions. Councillor McKinnon.
Thanks, Leader, and thanks for that report. I just want to pick up on one thing that you mentioned in relation to my own portfolio there, in terms of finance and economic development, and really put on record my thanks to the team who, during the height of the pandemic, led by Joseph here, our revenues and benefits staff worked so hard. I was part of those conversations that you alluded to, Leader, and I know that we were very keen to get the money out to businesses because they so desperately needed it. And the revenues and benefits team, that aided by staff that were seconded from other areas of the council, worked so hard in getting the money to businesses as quickly as possible when they really hadn't faced any challenge like this in living memory. Some of the testimonials we received from businesses who benefited have been really heartwarming. So yeah, a big thank you from me as well, Leader, and that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you, Councillor McKinnon. Councillor Stewart.
Thank you. Yeah, I was just going to use it as an opportunity. You mentioned surviving to thriving. There is still a little bit of money left. So if anybody watching this out in, within our residents' community groups has a project in mind that will improve mental health, then I would say please come forward, because we've still got a little bit of money there.
Thank you, Councillor Stewart, our champion for mental health. Councillor Pattenden.
Thank you, Leader. I notice on page 72 in the table, point 3, supporting our children, young people and our schools with a focus on the most vulnerable, says progress is substantively complete. So I was wondering if you could let us know how well catch-up is doing in schools. And you talked about this now moving to business as usual. So what will be done to allow pupils to catch up what they've lost over as a result of COVID? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pattenden. I think if you go down towards the dashboard and the details of what's been delivered, there's a list of programmes. I'm sorry, I struggle with the two screens to get to the list of programmes of all the actions that have been completed or are now implemented into schools. But there is a list on here within the report which details that work out. I think there is going to always be more, and we're still finding things out. I mean, for example, at the moment we are looking at a change. We've got GCSEs happened this year and A-levels happened this year, both back in person. And I think what's going to be really interesting for us is some of those results coming through and where we potentially need to focus that attention. But with the programmes that are in place, such as maths and literacy support, which are detailed in the report, I think there's an awful lot of work in play, which is why that substantiated is there. I'm not saying that there's not more to be done. I think we're going to be working in this space for many years to come. I think it's going to be a case of, as we see where that targeted intervention is required, that's where we need to most focus it. I don't have an update on the National Tutoring Programme. I don't know if Councillor Bowick can help me out on the National Tutoring Programme, or Executive Director.
Well, not specifically on the National Tutoring Programme, Leader, but we've just, I'm sure Councillor Paddington will just have seen a press release that we put out on the key stage 2 results. So that's up to year 6 children. Now, they're mixed. Generally speaking, the results are not as good as they were prior to the pandemic, but that's understandable. In some respects, there's one particular measure, reading, where we've done better than previously and better than in other areas. That's probably something to do with parents being able to spend much more time with their children. But you're right, Leader. Things are emerging, and our teachers, our schools are conscious of how well our children are doing and where they need to focus their efforts.
Thank you both. Councillor Culver.
Thank you, Leader. Just on the National Teaching Programme, I think that has been a complete farce. As we know, a lot of money was being skimmed off by private companies, and they've now decided to give it directly to the teachers, which is what they should have done in the first place. I just want to put on record the thanks of my group to the councillors, to the officers, to the volunteer hub, and to all of the communities who worked so hard during the lockdown. I know that we had many, many volunteers. Just in my ward alone, there were more people volunteering to help than there were people who actually needed their help. And we used to have a weekly Zoom meeting where we had the volunteers from the different villages, and I was able to talk to them about what was happening at the council, and they were able to ask me questions and so on. So it was a really, really good example of communities coming together. And I think we will be able to benefit from that strength of community building going forwards. I also want to thank the council for the help that they gave to businesses. I know that businesses in my area were very grateful for that support. And I agree with previous councillors' comments about the long tail of this crisis. We're going to have long COVID, we're going to have mental health crises, etc. And unfortunately, the cost of living crisis is just going to exacerbate that. So that's something we're going to have to all tackle together as well. So yeah, just to put on record our thanks to everybody concerned. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Culver, and I'm sure that will be minuted and is much appreciated. Councillor Vickers.
Thank you, Leader. Page 76, supporting our colleagues in the NHS. We've had reference to aspects of that. My question relates to the comments in the update where you say it's the problem is partly short-term Omicron, and of course that's to do with the COVID situation. That's the subject of the paper, but also longer term and unemployment, low unemployment, and presumably the implication of that is we're actually losing the sorts of people that do domiciliary care because the pay rates aren't competitive with similar elsewhere. But both look as though they're not going to go away for a long time. In a sense, what Councillor Culver says, the long tail, you know, as long as we've got Omicron, albeit it's not that serious, if somebody has to test positive, they're not in the workforce effectively, quite apart from the fact whether the contract of employment means they don't get paid while they're staying at home. I hope they do, otherwise they'll be tempted to just go in and spread the disease amongst the people they're caring for. So I'd like some indication of where the share of the problem is, whether it's mainly due to the ongoing Omicron COVID situation, or it's mainly to do with the lack of competitiveness in that particular job compared with situation elsewhere. Perhaps some officers.
Sorry, are you talking about the shortage of care workers?
Yeah, particularly in the domiciliary care, yes.
Right, I mean, that this is a national issue.
I know it's a national issue,
We've got a labour shortage there. Andy, would you care to comment?
Yeah, it is a national issue and indeed a pressure locally. There's no denying that. We have been very successful in West Berkshire in supporting the market through COVID. We haven't suffered with some of the issues that have been felt in other places, but it is a challenge we recognise. As part of that, there is an ongoing piece of work internally and with the market around growing the workforce and encouraging more people to come into that type of working environment. And there'll be more stuff to follow over the course of the coming weeks around that as well, to try and bring more people into that workspace.
Thank you, Leader. I mean, I must say, and this refers back to the adult care strategy, the way in which you choose people by their attitude and what you see as their potential and train them in-house. You know, from an ex-army background, that really does work, because some people are failed by the education system but have a lot to offer society.
Thank you, Councillor Vickers. I don't see any more hands, so I'm going to go to my colleague here on the left. Is there anything you wish to add?
Well, Leader, I think having been fairly front and centre in relation to the public aspect of the response to COVID, having chaired the local outbreak engagement board and so on and so forth, I reflect that whilst we are moving to a business as usual approach, nevertheless, COVID has not gone away, and we need to reflect that. Indeed, there has been communication we've been doing. If it hasn't gone out today, it will be going out shortly, in order to remind the public that COVID has not gone away, and that we still need to be aware, although the effect is substantially less, and I mean very substantially less than it was in the past. In terms of the report, a couple of things. There are many things I could refer to here, particularly with the health and wellbeing hat on. But two things I just want to specifically refer to. Firstly, is to reflect on what we have said about the response to the community. I think the response to the community was absolutely magnificent, and we are now building on that with our community and parish engagement piece, and I've spoken about that before, and we will see the fruits of that hopefully going forward in a not very distant future. The other piece is the changes into the health and care system. In particular, I mean, there's lots of references in the document to the ICP and the Integrated Care Partnership. Well, that's a reference, generally speaking, that's a reference to the place, that's Berkshire West for us, whereas now the Integrated Care Partnership has moved up further up to system to the Bob ICS, the Buckinghamshire, Oxfordshire and Berkshire West Integrated Care System. And a lot of what is in here about health and well-being is going to be part of the conversation we need to have with the system and into what is now the Integrated Care Partnership sitting at system level, which is a relationship between the NHS through the Integrated Care Board and the local authorities in Bob. And a lot of what is in this report will be reflected in that work. And I'm hoping that we can push a lot of things upstream. There's a reference in the report to prevention. And I think that is going to become even more important as we attempt to reduce the demands on the NHS, pushing work upstream so that we prevent people needing those services in the first place. It's going to be terribly important. And I think there's a lot of in this report that reflects that, and I simply want to say that we need to move forward with those things. But I'm very happy. I think it's a very good report. I, as you have done, I applaud officers, I applaud members who've been involved, and I applaud the communities that have been involved in doing this work. And I'm very happy to second it, Leader.
Thank you. Members of the Executive, therefore, we've got a recommendation that we approve the disbanding of the COVID recovery work and move it into our business as usual arena, and particularly looking at that for the Council strategy for 23-27. Can I see by show of hands if you are in favour of that recommendation?
Thank you, Leader. I can confirm the recommendation has been carried.
Thank you. Can we therefore move to item 10 on this evening's agenda, which is the performance report for Q4. Councillor Tom Marino, I believe you wish to introduce this report.
That's correct, Leader.
And propose it. Does that find a seconder?
I think I'm seconding this one, Leader.
Councillor Bridgman, I believe you were. Therefore, Councillor Marino, back to you.
Thank you, Leader. I'm delighted to introduce my first report to the Executive. As was the case in Q3, the Council continues to perform well, especially when compared to other parts of the country, and I would like to take this opportunity to commend all our officers for their incredibly hard and tireless work. As in previous quarters, measures that were rated red were mostly impacted by COVID-19. However, it is very encouraging that many of these only marginally missed their targets, usually only by a few percentage points. I won't list every positive in the report, as I'm sure nobody here wants me to go on all night. However, I'm delighted that the economy continues to show strong resilience and recovery, that the councils continue to ensure core business service delivery despite challenges such as the conflict in Ukraine, and that our children and family service has been rated good. Executive members are happy to answer any specific questions relating to their portfolios, either tonight or in writing following the meeting if necessary. Thanks, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Marino. Councillor Stewart, do you have a question for Councillor Marino?
I was just going to sort of follow up on some of the items that were adult social care. Would now be okay to do that? And I've had to put my glasses on because I can't make the type any bigger. So that whole digital thing is also an issue for me as well. Unfortunately, as I reported at Q3, we haven't achieved 100% in terms of CQC inspections for our care homes, which is a big disappointment still to the whole service. But the team have worked really hard at Birchwood addressing the concerns raised, and all of these rectifying actions have been submitted to the CQC. So we now await a follow-up and inspection. And I want to say thank you to everybody that was involved in that. The team took that report and the result very hard, but actually what they did was they rose to the challenge, and they really have turned things around, and I'm really thrilled to see that. I really hope that we get a positive result from when the inspection does happen. What you will also see in this report, it led to the number of new adult safeguarding inquiries increasing, and that's because we have a duty under those circumstances, and we had to report Birchwood as a provider of concern, and Section 42 inquiries were opened as a result, and with 50 residents residing there at that time when the inquiry was opened, that is what has led to that spike. One good thing, and there are many positive things about adult social care, but in particular context of this report, we had an excellent result for the percentage of financial assessments being completed within the timescales, which was only 2 assessments short of 100%. And I know that team have been working tirelessly to keep on top of this, which is so vital for those residents needing this service for their care needs. So I also want to congratulate them on a huge achievement. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stewart. Councillor Arderwater.
Yes. You know, so thank you. And likewise, I'd just like to pick out a couple of the KPIs within in particular, the waste portfolio, which are showing up red. And I'd just like to reassure all members that officers are acting on this and things are in progress to rectify. So with a little bit more explanation, in particular on the area of litter, which I know is a keenly noticed aspect of our services across the district. And again, as Councillor Stewart was saying, inevitably COVID has, over the last year, disrupted and forced a shift of resources from our contractor Veolia from, in particular, street care to support household waste collection. That is now being rectified, but again, we are still not back to where we and residents would expect, and I'll be keenly watching that those metrics as they, I'm confident, will improve over the coming months. In a similar sense, recycling, though of course recycling is driven much more by our residents than by our staff, recycling is at slightly lower than we would have liked it at this time of year. We have seen factors which are inevitable demographic reactions by residents to the change of the pandemic. I would notice maybe a positive health impact is that the amount of glass collected from households has reduced, and that is probably a health benefit for all of us, but has reduced, of course, our recycling percentage. And again, as members will be aware, with our forthcoming food waste collection service starting at the end of October, we are confident that that will significantly drive the numbers, which have been hovering just under the 50% mark, to the high 50s within 2 years. And finally, within that context, fly tipping, which in general is obviously is unwelcome wherever and whenever that happens, but we are fortunate in that most of the district does not suffer to the same extent as some areas around us. It had the numbers of reported incidents rose again during the pandemic. It is starting to come back down to pre-pandemic numbers, but again is higher than any of us would want. And again, I'm glad that we've been able to increase the resourcing on fly tipping enforcement within the environment team. So look forward to those numbers reducing again. So again, there is good reason for these numbers, leader and members. And again, I'd like to assure everyone that officers and myself are keen to move things still better. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Arderwater. Councillor Sumner.
Thank you, Leader. And similarly, I'm looking through the document itself. Obviously, there are a number of areas that sit with red that are under my portfolios, and they're all close to residents' hearts, and for good reasons. From a highways point of view, we continue to have suffered throughout the year from the after effects and the effect of COVID pandemic, and the work continues on delivering the projects that we know we need to and want to. It is more of a delay than a cancellation, and I want to reassure residents and members that we continue to strive forward on that one. Public rights of way, we've seen this is a bit of a double-edged sword, isn't it? Because we've seen a massive uptake in people being able and having time to go out for long walks across some of our fantastic countryside, and those public rights of way they don't just happen. There's an enormous amount of work that needs to go on there. We continue to push forward on that, and we will continue to deliver on that. And planning, which again is always a highly emotive subject. The planning service in its entirety has been under the spotlight, under an enormous amount of focus, and this is something that collectively with senior executives we are looking at how we are set up, how we work internally with our colleagues, how we work with our customer base in the widest sense. And that's something that we hope to be able to start turning the corner on some of these targets that are in place. I think some of them, when you look at the numbers that are being reported, whilst there has been improvement in some areas, it's not quite where we thought it would be. So they are near misses. But I recognise the fact that as an end of year report, you can't have a near miss and a carry forward. So whilst it is disheartening to see those reds, I don't think we should be totally despondent. And I can reassure that in all areas we continue to work and we continue to focus on what needs to be done. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Sumner. Members of the executive, any others that wanted to? Okay, I'll go to Councillor Brooks.
Thank you. I draw your attention to page 160. Prepare an inward investment strategy. Not achieved in Q3, not achieved in Q4. Reprioritisation, we can understand that. That's what the reason for red. What is lacking, in my view, on many of these exception reports is in the remedial action, it really ought to say when the objective will be achieved, when the red or amber status will go to green. That I will call for through OSMC, because I think it's perfectly reasonable to ask officers not only to say what they are doing, but when that will take this KPI back to green. Otherwise, we can just go on and on and on. And that remedial action there doesn't really tell us anything about when this strategy will be complete. And in similar vein, but actually perhaps really a bit worse, if you go to the page 166, develop and adopt the health and wellbeing strategy with partner organisations, red for 3/4. And I read in the remedial action, the final strategy will be reviewed at corporate board on the 16th of November 2021 and ops board on the 25th of November 2021. It will then be taken to the health and wellbeing board on 9th of December 2021. This is just lazy. This is just cut and paste from the last report. I don't know if you've read these reports, but to see something like that is very, very poor indeed. You're simply carrying forward something and not even updating it and you should really get a grip on these things. But my principal point is the remedial action should say when this will be resolved. And that's something you put on the officers to say, commit to a target. Otherwise, it's just, we'll get around to it sometime. Thank you.
Councillor Marina, it's a generic around the report and what the report contains rather than the individual. I mean, I can go to Councillor McKinnon on the actual particular of that one, but I think what Councillor Brooks is asking around because I see target dates in there, Councillor Brooks, and I think it's a case of a consistency. Councillor Marino, is that something that you're happy to pick up with the service?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I thank Councillor Brooks for his comments. I look forward to his contributions at OSMC, and I'll take those comments away.
Are you wanting to come on your health specific?
I think the comment on the health and wellbeing strategy is pretty straightforward. The target was September 2021. That was undoubtedly missed, which is why it's red. But the target was achieved. The health and wellbeing strategy has been adopted. It was adopted in December. So and it was not considered by full council. There's an error there because it didn't need to go to full council. The advice from officers, and I will. Yeah, I take that point. I am simply saying that the strategy has been adopted, and indeed a delivery plan is in place to forward it. I take your point on the failure to update the exception report.
Councillor McKinnon, do you want to come back on your specific on page
Yeah,
160?
just as Councillor Brooks mentioned the inward investment strategy. I mean, if you look 3 lines below it, it tells you that the development of a strategy will be picked up in service planning for 22-23. So it's going to be looked at in the next year. It might not be under the remedial management heading, but it's 3 lines below. Have a look.
It's 10 months.
What?
A bit more specific.
10 months from when?
2022-23, it's 10 months to next April. Be a bit more specific when it will be done. Sometime in the next 10 months.
Well, the data is in there.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to Councillor Sumner. Is that an old hand? Are you waiting? That's fine.
It is, apologies.
Okay. Councillor Vickers.
Thank you. I've got 5 of the reds to ask some comments from Councillor Sumner. I'm afraid, yes, it is a
All
big
Councillor
portfolio.
Sumner?
They are all Councillor. Actually, no, one
Councillor
of them may
Sumner.
go to Councillor McKinnon, although because it's housing benefit, and I'm the housing spokesperson, I do see a relevance. So taking them in order in the report, principal road network, it seems a fairly demanding target for A roads. I must admit, my travelling on A roads, these specific, I don't go down to the one north of Streatley very often, but the others, they don't look too bad to me. So my question here is, are we held to this kind of target? Is this a national target that is set for us, or is this something that we set ourselves? Because I personally think the real problem is with C roads. Number of the C roads are in an appalling state in the district, but I don't know that there doesn't appear to be a KPI for that. That's my comment on that. Shall I do them one at a time?
Yeah,
would that be easier?
Yeah, because I'll never remember them otherwise.
We'll do them one at a time.
Local target to get into the top 25 percentile nationally. So it's yes, I don't disagree with you at all. It is a very stringent target, and I think that's a conversation that we have and we will continue to have as to how tight they are. Because when you look at it, 2% to 3%, it doesn't take a lot to miss it. And I would agree with you that on balance, the A roads are, I think, very good in the majority of areas. I will be challenged on that. I have no doubt whatsoever. But I think if you look at the A roads across the district, they are in good quality.
Leader, is public rights of way programme a subject close to my heart as a keen rambler and a member of the local access forum for most of its existence. Public rights of way improvement plan, which unfortunately has no sort of, there's no requirement to implement a plan, but it's still a useful document to see where our priorities lie. And yes, there were a lot of comments, but my concern is that in the financial implications, it says the contract documents, presumably with some contractor that we're employing to update this. I believe there is a contracted person that's doing the update. the eventuality that the project cannot be completed. I'm hoping that is a very remote eventuality. Perhaps you could comment on that, because it's a very useful document and a lot of very good comments were made by people who, you know, from various perspectives want to see a better plan.
Yeah, absolutely. And that reflects exactly what I said earlier on, which is that there's been a massive uptake in usage and interest in usage across the district. Yes, it's highly unlikely would probably be a better phrase. And it does finish off with, we are not envisaging this at the moment. And I'll continue to push on that to make sure that continues to be the case. And then we work together to make sure it's in place and doing what it needs to do.
The next one is housing benefit claims. Clearly, a lot of the reason is to do with COVID and lots of people who've never had to claim before. But we're going to be facing this with a cost of living crisis, you know, facing us imminently. Have targets been looked at for the current year now that will take account of what we must expect to be an even bigger increase in claims? I see the 3 new members of staff continues. If it were not for the rise in energy prices and the cost of living crisis generally, yeah, that 500% increase might go away, but I fear it won't. So that's my question there. I can't see offhand a date for, you know, shifting the target to the right, you know, completion date. It's not really something that will be complete. It goes on and on and on forever, doesn't it?
Councillor McKinnon, do you have a view?
Yeah, just I think to be fair to Councillor Vickers, he mentioned this himself. I mean, it's quite a challenging target, and it was not missed by a mile. It was just past the post. 500% increase in grant applications and payments in the last quarter. So, you know, I thank you for recognising that. I would hope that as things settle down a little bit, COVID-wise, then we would see an improvement in that target. But of course, as you mentioned, cost of living is a challenge. But yeah, I just wanted to put that on record.
Planning applications, other, page 156. I'm concerned that, it's going back to the point that Councillor Brooks made, remedial management, we anticipate that we will achieve the performance target on this measure going forward. When do you expect to achieve the target by? Is my question there.
And again, I would say within that section, I take note that there isn't a date in there, and that's because a date can't be provided at this point. It does say that in there that the place review work is ongoing and it aims to support the achievement of better results during 22-23. And that is the case. It is something that we can pick up within our planning advisory groups for a general conversation. I'm happy to do so.
Thank you. And I think finally, number of additional kilometres of cycle route provided. Again, a subject close to my heart. My concern here is the last bullet point under significant issues, reason for red, negotiations over release of land. Now here, I know there's one piece of land in my own ward and another one not far away where it's the town council that presumably we're negotiating with. And I suspect it's legal that is holding this up because it's been going on and on and on about, you know, access to land. We want to get onto the green. Actually, the cycleway one is to do with the Andover Road. So is this a problem with legal, not having the resources to deal with it, or is it property? Because in other respects, I think we're doing as well as we can, and the other reasons are cost of materials, which we fully understand.
Do you want to take that, John? John, take it direct.
Thank you for your question. Yeah, the negotiation with landowners is in the main private landowners. It's just a lengthy negotiation process when, you know, you're trying to agree the price, or perhaps they don't want to sell. So this bullet point wasn't referring to Newbury Town Council land.
Thank you. Councillor Pattenden.
Thank you, Leader. Yeah, a few more where there are not really any dates. And
Councillor Pattenden, when you ask could you just be specific where you're talking? Because it's difficult to scroll through. I was going to say that to Councillor Vickers, but if you tell us which specifics.
I will. Yeah, I'll give you the page numbers. This
Yeah,
is from
that's great. Thank you.
From the exception report, and it is page number 143. Percent of children in care where the child has been visited in the past 6 weeks. So the remedial action says that this is something that is expected to gradually return to normal. Now, that doesn't sound like a very ambitious way to resolve something that is now, well, still only at 89.8% with a target of 95. I wondered if you had any comments about that one. Firstly, I've got a couple of others. Do you want to take them individually?
I agree entirely, and it's a point that I've actually raised as well. So I'm going to go to Councillor Bowick because I know we've discussed it.
Yes, we have, Leader, and it is improving, Councillor Paddington. You make a good point, but it is improving. Certainly, last month the figure was up to 91%. I know it's only a month, but the service is focusing on this particular measure. But the question is, how important is it? It's important, but the fact is that children are still being seen, or there is still contact with children. Alternatives are workarounds are put in place when face-to-face isn't possible. And last year, which this report is about, of course, there were many occasions when children in care couldn't be seen face-to-face by the social worker. And risk assessments are carried out around that. So it's important, but it's not. Children are not at risk as a consequence of this measure not being achieved.
Okay, thank you. Maybe the use of the word gradually might be phased out if that's applicable in that case. Also got a question about page 157. Let me get there. 157 and 158, in fact, you know, these are both measures that seem to be getting worse. Wondered how confident you are that the remedial action is going to allow us to reach the objective, and if possible, whether you could give an indication of when that's likely to happen.
The problem we have with 157, and I'm reluctant to put this to you, but we actually have a process problem. The problem is not it's more to do with the way that the reporting is done than actually what's happening to children affected by this. So, for example, when they moved on to another part of the service, that is often logged as a re-referral, when in practice there's still the case is still open to the services. That's something that the service is working on. But thank you for your observation.
Thank you both. I see no other hands. Councillor Bridgman, did you want to add anything?
Well, no, save that I just wonder whether this does need a seconder.
It doesn't. It's actually my chairman's briefing note. I apologise to everybody. This report is to note, and therefore there is no requirement for it to have a seconder. And I think we have all duly noted. So thank you all.
Hence my surprise, Leader.
Apologies all. Okay, can we move therefore to the final main item on tonight's agenda, which is item 11, which is a statutory consultation on Hackney carriage tariffs. Councillor Marino, your second report.
Yes, Leader, Council, the report seems to be like buses. They come along in two at once.
And there are recommendations which require a vote. So does that find a seconder?
And this time it definitely meets.
I'm very pleased to hear so, Councillor Bridgman. Back to you, Councillor Marino.
Yeah, thank you, Leader, and thank you to members for agreeing to this urgent item being included on this evening's agenda. Officers have been approached by the trade about expediting the annual taxi tariff review in light of the current fuel prices, which have increased by around 35% since the tariffs were set in November last year. Ordinarily, we would expect to see this paper at the September executive meeting. Officers have informally canvassed the trade, and the results of that survey show there is overwhelming support for varying them. What was less clear was the difference between those that wanted to see a 5% increase and those that supported a 10% increase. The licensing committee therefore favoured going out to consult on option 2, which would result in an uplift of around 8%. I support this option, and I would encourage the executive to do the same. We're also seeking to include fouling charges on the tariff card for the first time. This charge is designed to reflect the cost of cleaning the vehicle as well as the loss of income whilst the vehicle cannot be used. The matter was discussed at the licensing committee, where they felt that the proposed charges of £150 for the interior of the vehicle and £100 for the exterior were too high, and that they should be amended to £75 and £25 respectively. I support this change. The legislation requires us to consult for a minimum of 14 days. The licensing committee was supportive of this option as well, as they felt that the time was of the essence on this occasion, and I propose on this occasion that's what we do. Members should note that if no objections are received or any that are received are withdrawn, the tariffs will come into effect the day after the consultation closes. If there are objections and they are not withdrawn, we will bring a report back to the September executive meeting for discussion. Any variations have to come into effect within 2 months of the consultation closing. I therefore propose that in relation to the recommendations as set out on pages 175 and 176, that we do go out to consult on variations to the tariff, that we consult on option 2, that we consult for 14 days, and that we set the fouling charge at £75 and £25 for external and internal respectively.
Thank you, Councillor Marino. Councillor Bridgman, do you want to come back now? Or?
Well, I hopefully this isn't a particularly controversial issue. As Councillor Marino says, we last reviewed Hackney carriage tariffs in November, and that was after quite a long while since they had previously been reviewed. And I said at that time that the intention was to get back into an annual cycle of review. And of course, as with many things, events moved rapidly, and we are all aware of the increased impact of fuel cost. I will say I was at licensing committee. There was a very good discussion. The additional paper you've got reflects that discussion, and that anyone interested can watch that meeting back on YouTube. There was one thing that I've suggested to officers needs to change in the table, which is at the moment it refers to a maximum, that this is what's called the flag charge. In other words, when you get into a Hackney carriage, a taxi, there is an immediate charge that takes you a certain distance. And at the moment, the table refers to that as being a maximum charge up to a certain number of yards or a certain number of seconds. I've reflected that that isn't really what it is. It's actually a minimum charge. It's the minimum you're going to pay when you get into a cab. So there is there's a revised wording to go into the table. I don't think we need to go into debate over that, but it will actually more accurately reflect what that charge is all about. That said, I fully support the paper.
Thank you, Councillor Bridgman. Councillor Sumner.
Thank you, Leader. And yes, thank you for the additional comments, Councillor Bridgman, because I think they're very helpful. I suppose for me, there are 2 points really that also need to be considered, and I know that they are being, but they're worth noting. One is that should those prices in fuel go back down again to sensible rates, let's be honest, that the same speed will be applied to a secondary review. And the other is with regards to the trade and its intention to look at alternatives. And again, I know those conversations are ongoing, but I think it's worth noting that, you know, we are doing as an authority, as many others are, as much as we can to provide alternative to petrol and to diesel, primarily with EV. And I hope that the industry is taking a serious look at whether they can adopt that as an alternative and avoid these sort of situations in the future. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Sumner. Councillor Vickers.
Yeah, I mean, I agree entirely with what Councillor Sumner said, and taxis are part of what I look at as being the future more rental economy, where more people choose not to own but to use car club, car rental, taxis. You know, living in Hong Kong for 4 years, I never once dreamed of buying a car. The problems would have been horrendous. I know Newbury's not Hong Kong, but it's left me with an impression that actually you can save a lot of money and have a jolly good life without a car, unless you like cleaning it and all of that. So cleaning is one of the questions I have, is this cleaning charge. I understand, but how often and how are we going to monitor this? How often is the cleaning charge going to be paid? That was one question. The other is, an important stakeholder group are the regular users, the people that depend on taxis, who are going to have to fork out the extra amount. And it occurs to me that in our publication of the notice, we should ask all taxis, all Hackney carriages, to display the notice facing the passenger in the back seat so that they too have a chance to respond. Those are the two comments.
Thank you. I'm going to go to Councillor Bridgman, unless you particularly wish to take Councillor Marino.
I just wanted to come back on two of the points that were just made, one by Councillor Sumner and one by Councillor Vickers. So Councillor Sumner, with regards to the tariffs going up, it is my understanding that there is no restriction on the times the tariffs can be changed. So should the price of cost of fuel go down again, they can always be adjusted. And Councillor Vickers, with regards to the fouling, I agree. Obviously, there's no way that you can fully sort of predict when and where these fouling charges are going to happen. Obviously, we are all aware of the stereotypes of people having a bit too much on a night out and someone throwing up in the back seat or on the outside of the taxi. I do feel the charges are acceptable, considering obviously there's the opportunity cost of not being able to use your vehicle and obviously cleaning it as well. Obviously, it's, external is obviously a bit less of a problem than the internal. But there's no way to really predict. But the other comments you made, I'm more than happy to take as RE sort of taxi firms sort of promoting the consultation, so to speak. I'm happy to take those back in a way.
Thank you. Did you want to come back in there? I see you waving at me.
Well, Leader, couple of things. Firstly, on the EV and hybrid, there will be a paper coming to council, because you'll recall there was a motion on the subject that was debated at length. Again, I invite you to watch the meeting back and watch the debate. And indeed, the other Councillor Vickers was in the room for the debate. So that is coming forward. On the fouling charge, well, I do agree that it's difficult to monitor, but on the other hand, I do think it's necessary. And I speak, as I said at licensing committee, as the proud grandfather of a grandchild who was born in a black cab on the Euston Road. So I think sometimes it is necessary to have that in the taxi driver's armoury. Thank you.
Thank you all. Members of Executive, we've got a detailed recommendation there in section 2, and you can see it's 2.1 right the way through to 2.10. Can I see a show of hands if you are in favour of those recommendations as laid out in the paper?
Thank you very much, Leader. I can confirm that the recommendation has been carried.
Thank you, Shiraz. In which case we can move on to item 12, which is our members' questions. And firstly, I'd like to thank all the members that have submitted questions for this evening's executive meeting. As usual, the questions will appear on screen and will be answered by the relevant portfolio holder. Members, I think you all know this. Do you need me to read it out every time? I think we'll go straight to the first of our questions. Now, Councillor Brooks actually had to give his apologies and has left the meeting, and therefore we can go to question D on our agenda, which is Councillor Pattenden to Councillor Bowick.
Thank you for your question, Councillor Pattenden. The provision of free school meal vouchers has been prioritised to assist and support children over the 6-week summer holidays and will be made available via early years settings and schools. The vouchers sit alongside the Holiday Activities and Food Programme, the HAF programme, which is also available to children eligible for free school meals and others, of course. The HAF will be running for 4 days a week for 4 weeks of the summer holiday period. Do you have a supplementary?
I do. Thank you, Councillor Bowick. So what do you envisage happening for holidays after this summer?
How far out are we thinking about here, Councillor?
Well, half term. Well, next term.
Okay, so what's happened?
Christmas holiday.
What's happened
and beyond?
What's happened historically is that if we go back to last year and before, we didn't provide free school meal vouchers for all of the half-term holidays. We have no plans at the moment to go beyond the summer holiday, but we know that the Household Support Fund has been extended, and we're looking at using that extension to, we're looking to see how we can use it. And that may well be that we provide free school meal vouchers for half term.
Thank you both. Councillor, question E, which is Councillor Vickers to Councillor Sumner.
Thank you, Leader, and thank you, Councillor Vickers, for your question. The extension of the Regulation 18 consultation allows the authority to thoroughly respond to the comments received, and more work is being done to address the issues raised, meaning that the Council does not at this time anticipate significant new issues to arise during the Regulation 19 consultation, and that reduces the time required at that stage. Do you have a supplementary?
Yes, I do. The target time now, March next year, is quite significant in that if it's not met, we get into PERDA. Has the council considered extending the contract to the key person who I was very impressed when I met, who's going to help with public and stakeholder participation on the process, and who says that he believes that that's one of the reasons, having him in post, that you may be able to shorten the time frame.
Yeah, I think PERDA's probably been on everybody's lips just recently over the past 48 hours, let's be honest. Yes, I think, I mentioned earlier on about the structure of the planning service generally, and the resourcing within it. And we are constantly having conversations about how we resource and how we ensure that we meet the deadlines that we are setting ourselves. So yes, and again, you will be included in those conversations within our meetings, and happy to have conversations with you within.
Thank you all. Members, we have now reached the end of our business for this evening. All business has been concluded, and therefore I would like to thank you all for your attendance, and I close this meeting.
The live stream is closed.